After nearly 20 years, the Taliban is back in power in Afghanistan. It says it wants an Islamic system that's compatible with society. But what will that mean for millions of Afghans? And how are world powers reacting to this development? This is Inside Story. Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Kim Vinnell. Afghanistan is now under the full control of the Taliban. It took the armed group less than 10 days to sweep across every province and all the way to the presidential palace in the capital, Kabul. Its leadership says it wants peace and an inclusive government that's compatible with Islamic law. But many Afghans are sceptical. Observers are worried after scenes of panic and desperation at Kabul's international airport on Monday. Thousands of Afghans have been trying to leave the country since the fall of the government a day earlier. But all commercial flights have been cancelled until further notice. The Taliban has tried to reassure people they have nothing to fear. In the US, the rapid fall of the Afghan government appeared to come as a surprise for some White House officials. President Joe Biden is facing criticism for sticking to the plan initiated by his predecessor, Donald Trump, to end the US military mission. But Secretary of State Antony Blinken insists Washington has achieved its goals in Afghanistan.
Let's take a step back. This is manifestly not Saigon. The fact of the matter is this. We went to Afghanistan 20 years ago with one mission in mind, and that was to deal with the people who attacked us on 9/11. And that mission has been successful. We brought bin Laden to justice a decade ago. Al-Qaeda, the group that attacked us, has been vastly diminished. Its capacity to attack us again from Afghanistan has been, right now, does not exist. And we're going to make sure that we keep in place in the region the capacity, the forces necessary to see any reemergence of a terrorist threat and to be able to deal with it. So in terms of what we set out to do in Afghanistan, we've done it.
The Taliban is holding talks to form what it calls an open, inclusive Islamic government. It's unclear what that will look like, but a spokesman says certain policies have already been agreed. The armed group says the rights of women will be respected. They'll have access to education and will be allowed to work as long as they wear the hijab. People will be able to criticise whoever they want. Media freedoms will be tolerated, but with limits on, quote, character assassination. And the Taliban says criminal punishments will be decided by the courts. We'll bring in our guests in just a moment, but first, Rob McBride has this update from Kabul.
Chaotic and tragic scenes continuing to unfold at Kabul's international airport, with thousands of people still desperate to get out of Afghanistan as the Taliban secures its control of Kabul. All of this began when it was realized that the government here was collapsing. There was a surge of people towards the airport. They have completely taken over the terminal, with many people spilling onto the runway, clambering to get onto aircraft that were parked there. Also clambering to get onto US military aircraft as they were taxiing for takeoff. There have also been some clips, tragically, of people clinging to wings and then falling to their deaths as the planes were taking off. There has been, to some extent, a certain amount of order has attempted at being restored, with the Taliban putting a cordon around the terminal to stop any more people getting in. And the US forces, of course, as they continue their evacuation of embassy personnel and other US citizens, have their own cordon. But still, there are thousands of people between those two cordons, desperate to find any flights, as the flights, all commercial flights at least, remain cancelled at this stage. In Kabul itself, things remain fairly calm and quiet on the streets, but there is a fairly surreal feel about this first day of Taliban rule here, with many people, Kabul residents, coming out for the first time to see Taliban fighters now taking over checkpoints where once there were soldiers and police, who again seem to have disappeared, melted away, as the Taliban gets to grips with the governing of this country. But it is fairly surreal, with many Kabul residents talking for the first time to the Taliban, who've arrived in their midst here in Kabul as they get to grips with this new reality. Many of them taking selfies, shaking hands as we move forward into the unknown, as the Taliban takes control and we see what this new Taliban rule will look like. Rob McBride in Kabul for Inside Story.
OK, let's bring in our guests. In Washington, D.C., we have Shafiq Hamdam, former Deputy Senior Advisor to former President Ashraf Ghani and a former Senior Advisor to NATO in Afghanistan. In Doha, we have Abdul Salam Zaeef, a founding member of the Taliban and former Taliban ambassador to Pakistan. In Newfane, Vermont, we have Peter Galbraith, a former Deputy United Nations Special Envoy to Afghanistan. A very warm welcome to you all. I'd like to begin with you, Mr. Abdul Salam Zaeef. You are one of the founding members of the Taliban. Tell me, is this going to be what we see now? Is it going to be the Taliban rule of old, or have things changed? Has the group changed?
I think right now this is very fast to justice about. I think the Taliban, which did declare from before they are believing on political solution in Afghanistan, especially for the Kabul. Before the Taliban was coming to Kabul yesterday, it was supposed to the Taliban will not enter to Kabul till the delegation is coming to Doha and sitting with the Taliban and discussing how to come to Kabul, how to be transferred of the power in Kabul, and how the Taliban will be coming, entering to the Kabul. But unfortunately, leaving Kabul from some responsible people and this security in the Kabul, that's giving a chance the Taliban to enter to the city for the security reason, to keep the security of the people, and to this was also a request from some people from inside the Kabul. The Taliban should come to take responsibility because there is no security force in Kabul. There is no responsible for that.
Okay.
I think still the Taliban didn't declare anything about the presidential house. Still, they are waiting. The team will come to Doha. It was supposed to come today, but I don't know it's due to Doha or not.
Okay.
But they will be discussing the issue, political issue, with this delegation, and then they will be declaring what will be the next position of Taliban. And anything will be declared. OK,
we will talk a little bit later in the programme about those talks in Doha and what a future governance might look like. But first, I want to come to you, Shafiq Hamdam. You were an advisor to the former president, I guess, Ashraf Ghani. What's your take on developments? Does the Taliban have legitimacy?
No, not at all. So far, they do have the charge. They do control a lot of the country. But in order to have a legitimacy, they require a vote, an endorsement, or whatever you call it, from the Afghan people. So for that, I think it's required that immediately Taliban have to call for a loya jirga, where two representatives of Afghan people get together and they decide about the future of Afghanistan. Let's not forget the Taliban has claimed repeatedly, and they're standing on this, saying that they're not fighting for power, they're not fighting for position. And now they have to prove, because, they have, overthrown a government. They have forced foreign troops to leave Afghanistan. So now they have to prove in action what they have claimed for. So even think of this, if Afghan people have to choose, elect, or vote for Taliban, that's absolutely fine. But for Taliban, the immediate thing is to have this legitimacy internally. Then they can appeal to the global or world community for their recognition. But first step is first. They have to have first, recognition within the Afghan people. And this is immediately needed because there is a vacuum of power. There's vacuum of legitimacy. We do have, institutions. We do have a government that needs to be run. Meanwhile, we do have diplomatic representation across the globe that they have to be accountable to somebody and have to be officially representing Afghanistan. Therefore, I think Taliban has more to do now than they were guessing or than they had to do while they were fighting.
OK, Peter Galbraith, if you accept, as Shafiq Hamdam posits there, that the Taliban doesn't have legitimacy, did Ashraf Ghani have legitimacy? Did the Afghan government have legitimacy?
Well, that is the question. And that, I think, the lack of legitimacy explains why the whole Afghan government military collapsed in a matter of days. Ashraf Ghani was in office as a result of 2 consecutive massively fraudulent elections. His predecessor, Hamid Karzai, obtained a second term as a result of a massively fraudulent election. And the trouble was that when you come into office by having corrupt power brokers put you in power, it makes it almost impossible to deal with the problem in Afghanistan, which was massive corruption. And you could see this in the military, where soldiers weren't paid, where they weren't resupplied, where Afghans felt that the institutions didn't serve them. The roads were built to allow subsistence farmers to be market farmers, and then a corrupt police would set up checkpoints and basically rob them. So this was the larger problem, was a lack of legitimacy by the previous government, and frankly, its soldiers weren't willing to defend it, even though they were vastly better armed than the Taliban and more numerous.
Okay. Abdul, Salam, Zaeef, I'd like to come back to you. If we're talking about the way that the Taliban has taken over, often it was able to come through taking over many districts seemingly without a fight. But Human Rights Watch says there have also been instances that the Taliban has executed soldiers and even civilians who have ties to the Afghan government. What are you hearing?
I don't know really, because I'm far away, but when I'm in contact with the people, I was contacting with the people, they were happy, and they said something was happening, but this was not from Taliban side, and this was like a personal executing some people, because, in Kandahar, it was a lot of cruelty was done before, and this was, many people will disappear. And this was something very hard expected to be happening, but it was less than expected.
Okay.
I think the Taliban, they were not taking responsibility, but they were trying to always to find the people who is doing something wrong and who is executing the human rights. But this was not like we heard from some side like propaganda against the Taliban.
Okay, Shafiq, Hamdam, your family is in Afghanistan. You're in Washington, D.C., but your family is there. How are they feeling? How are you feeling?
It depends. I do feel very bad because, I'm worried about their safety and security. And they, honestly, they are not worried much about security anyway, because it wasn't secure before this. But they're worried, like for my mother, who's teaching girls, if she can continue teaching girls. And for my sister, who has studied, Islamic Sharia, she's graduate of college. And actually, I took her during Taliban regime to secret schools. And now, gladly, she's a, graduate of college. Can she continue and work? And my brother, who's a computer scientist, another brother who's an engineer, and another brother who's also in the military. Can they serve their nation with their skills, with their ability and knowledge? And beyond that, I think, now Ashraf Ghani has gone. There is another man replacing him, correct? But what about these women, cabinet members, women parliamentarians, politicians? I know Taliban has claimed that they have been changed, and I'm looking and observing. I hope it's true, and I have seen some signs of changes as well. But they do not have this capacity to replace these women. They do not have invested on women, to have this power now to come and replace for what's so-called the puppet regime or whatever you call it by the Taliban means. So I'm afraid if women are not included, if they're excluded from the political decision-making body, especially from the cabinet, especially from judicial system, then I think we will return back to before 2000 or 2001. So my suggestion, and I think it's a challenge for the Taliban as well, that the world and Afghan people see how much they have changed, how much tolerance do they have against minority, against different ethnicity groups. These are the things that we still have to observe and see the changes what the Taliban have claimed so far.
Abdul, Salam, Zaeef, what are you hearing from the Taliban? Because this is a big question for a lot of women. will they have access to education? And girls, will they be allowed to work?
Which I'm hearing, I heard from the Taliban, they will be allowing the women to go to school and to study, and for the student to study, and also to work, go to the politics, and the teacher will go to their jobs. And this, all the things the Taliban, they agreed, and they declared that before they would be not against anyone. But I think just the condition will be changed. The right of the women, the right of the people to do work in Afghanistan and to do politics and to do study, it will be not changing.
OK. Peter Galbraith, we heard earlier from the US Secretary of State who said that American interests, or objectives rather, have been achieved. But this has also been described as a colossal humiliation for the US. What's your take?
Well, it's a catastrophic failure. The United States was in Afghanistan for 20 years, twice as long as the Soviet Union. It spent around $2 trillion, more than 2,300 dead. It spent hundreds of billions on the Afghan military and police and in aid programs. And the thing collapsed in days. You know, when my first trip to Afghanistan was February 14th, 1989, with the Mujahideen, and that was the day the Soviets withdrew. The Soviet-installed regime lasted more than 2 years. It even outlasted the Soviet Union itself, whereas this collapse took place before the Americans had even finished their withdrawal. So it's really stunning, and I want to say a couple of points. First, I feel for Shafiq Hamdam's family and the families of my friends who are in Kabul. This is a time of terrible uncertainty. I was speaking to some today. You know, there are people going door to door, Taliban, or maybe just robbers, people dressed like Taliban. So it's terrifying. And the other point I want to make is there's the problem of, in addition to women and girls, which of course is enormous, there's the problem of the Hazara, who are Shiite. And if you look at the map, that's the part of Afghanistan the Taliban have not taken or not yet taken. And when the Taliban were last in power, there were massacres of Shiites and something that began to look like genocide. So, and of course, the Taliban are a Salafi jihadi group who view Shiites as apostates. So what's going to happen to that community is 15% of Afghanistan's population. This is something that ought to be of major concern to the international community, in addition to the concern about the future of women and girls.
OK, yeah, you make a very interesting point. I want to put that to you, Abdul, Salam, Zaeef. I mean, is that something that the international community should be concerned about?
I think about the issue of Hazara, this is not the issue of concern. Already there was a lot of negotiation to the Hazara ulama, scholar, in the tribe leader. And this problem is resolved. There is nothing to be a clash between Taliban and Hazara by any means. And the Taliban, they are not raising this kind of issue like some people, they already wanted to raise this issue, but the Taliban was very careful about this issue. And the new Afghanistan, I think the Taliban, they are more experienced. They have more experience. They have a lot of information about the past. They will not do the same mistake which was done before from not moving. But I think the Taliban know the importance of Afghanistan, the importance and the legitimacy, the importance of the unity in Afghanistan, the importance of the world community, and this all they are thinking about that. They are discussing. They are aware of that. I think they will be in the next Afghanistan. I'm not thinking these kind of things would happen between tribes.
Okay.
That's if I tell to my colleagues that. One thing in two weeks, all the government was collapsing, including the Americans. Still, they are in Kabul. that is showing the people what they want, what the people of Afghanistan want, what is the priority of the people. The priority of the people is life, security, and stability. Then other things. I think this is very important. When the stability is coming, the rest of things is possible to be discussed and developed.
I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. I want to put exactly that to Shafiq Hamdam, because if we look forward, and we need to look forward now, the former president, Hamid Karzai, is forming a coordinating council to try and manage a peaceful transfer of power. How do you think that is going to go? What discussions will be being had behind closed doors now?
That's absolutely illegitimate body, has no legitimacy and no power and no recognition, because the people in this coalition, the three individuals, cannot represent Afghanistan and Afghan people. They are also failed leaders that even they have never ever truly received the legitimacy or endorsement from the Afghan people. So how they will be able to transfer a power that has no existence anymore, and how they would transfer power to somebody who already in power. So I think that's beyond discussion, and it's up to the Afghan people, to the Afghan nation to decide how they will form their future government, and Taliban can facilitate that. As I mentioned before, that government could be the Taliban regime.
Sure.
But let's not forget, and let's not allow individuals to think and to decide on behalf of Afghan people. We have experienced a massive failure of President Ghani, mainly because he tried to represent the nation, but he wasn't true representative of the people. So Taliban has to be also careful. If they want to get this legitimacy endorsement, they have to return to the people and must not include and believe in these individuals who have been part of failures in Afghanistan, who have been, committing and known as war criminals and atrocities. So if, again, these people are involved in the formation of the government, if again they are in power, I don't see any difference, and I don't see any reason for Taliban to say, hey, we are here with a change.
OK, we're nearing the end of the programme. Peter Galbraith, I'd like to come back to you. Do you foresee a future in which the US will form diplomatic relations with the Taliban?
Well, personally, I think the United States should. Diplomatic recognition does not imply approval. It simply is a recognition of the fact that the Taliban are, in fact, the government of Afghanistan. They have seized power. That is a fact. And so the question is, will the United States be better able to accomplish its objectives in Afghanistan, which include making sure that terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS do not re-establish themselves there, and being able to do something to promote the rights of women, girls, to protect the Hazars and the ethnic minority, and to facilitate the exit from Afghanistan of the people who supported the international coalition, not just interpreters and people who work for the embassies or the military, but also people who work for the United Nations and for the NGOs. I hope many of them will be able to stay, but clearly many of them will want to go. And for all those reasons, it makes sense to have a continued diplomatic presence, not like what we had, maybe quite a small embassy, but to be engaged with the new government, which we, of course, wish wasn't there, but in fact is there.
All right, we'll have to leave it there for time. So much more we could talk about it. Thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. Shafiq, Hamdam, Mullah, Abdul, Salam, Zaeef and Peter Galbraith. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story, or you can message me directly @Kim Vinnell. From me and the whole team here in Doha, bye-bye for now.